One evening, I had gotten hurt, so I was stuck in my lazy boy chair, and this dreary ad comes on for what was happening in Africa, and suddenly there was this footage from the Ethiopian famine. And I just started watching people huddling over small fires, no shelter, no anything. Boom, I just woke up that minute. I literally said, I have to personally get involved in this in some way. I made a decision a long time ago that you're either in or out. This is not going to be an easy thing. I'm sitting here today out of pure grace. In Somalia, I was in a building that was hit by a mortar and half the building collapsed. I was in Angola and we were riding in a convoy and the car in front of me blew up. I was in southern Sudan, Rwanda, Congo, and we're in the middle of one of the most dangerous places in the world. If you're going to be a human rights advocate, you're going to have to step up. And the ideal scenario is that we are going to have a mass movement of people who are dedicated to ending genocide, ending crimes against humanity. That's the neat thing about 21st century activism, is that everyone can be an agent of change in this thing in a way that they never were before.
Please join me in welcoming John Prendergast. Thank you. When I heard from Random House that I would be following Eboo Patel and Wes Moore, I was like, really? I do not want my book to be part of the experience. And then I get to the booth on Saturday. You guys were all here, and who do I have to sit next to? Yep, Wes Moore. A half hour after the event was over and the doors were closed, the line was still snaking around the booths for Wes to sign their book. The MC was like, Wes, please sign my book, over the PA system. And Random House was like, John, can you make sure that Wes has his appetizers? He's working on a huge appetizer, signing all these books. So here I am, ladies and gentlemen, the other Wes Moore. So for the two people left in the audience who haven't decided to use either Eboo's or Wes's book, hi. I'm here today to tell you that student activism can make a real difference in our world, even halfway around the globe, in ending wars and stopping human rights crimes in Africa. As you know, and you guys are on the front lines of this, is young people often think they can't make a difference. They think some of the world's biggest problems simply cannot be resolved. And the book, The Enough Moment, is an antidote to that sense of hopelessness. But first, I don't want to miss this opportunity to talk to you a little bit about the places that I've spent my adult life, the war zones in Africa. Let's go for a moment to Congo, which most of us have absolutely no idea is actually the deadliest war in the world since World War II. Millions have died, hundreds of thousands of women and girls have been raped, and these are simply numbing statistics. So let me introduce you to just one of these people. Honorata is a 57-year-old Congolese woman with a very expressive face and hard smile, and the kind of faraway eyes that let you know that she's witnessed things that most of us can't even imagine. A few years ago, Honorata was a school teacher, and she would go on weekends, on Saturdays, to the local mine where they were mining all kinds of minerals for global consumption. She would sell salt there in order to supplement her income so that her family could eat throughout the week, because the teacher's salaries are so small, as some of you might know. And she went one day to a mine, and as fate would have it, the mine was attacked that day by one of the militias in the area. And Honorata and the other women and girls that were there in the mine were abducted and taken into the Congolese forest. When she was brought to the militia barracks where the militia was headquartered, she could hear some of the militiamen say, "We're happy now that the food has arrived." And Honorata and the other women and girls were held as sex slaves for 2 years and gang raped by the militiamen in each new location as they moved around from mine to mine. And Honorata told me how shamed and angry she felt. "I was a wife and a teacher," she told me, "but now I was being called food." One day there was heavy fighting over one of the mines, and Honorata and 20 of the other women and girls saw their chance to escape, so they ran. And they ran through the forest, and they made it to, over a course of a few days of being helped along in safe houses along the way in the forest. They reached the main town of Bukavu, right there on the border of Rwanda. And the ladies met a Congolese Good Samaritan there. He was a sailor who was frequently out on Lake Kivu, so he was traveling all the time, and he simply allowed Honorata and 5 of the women and girls to just stay at his house while he was off on his seafaring adventures. And these survival stories we find are peppered with all these remarkable acts of generosity. We never hear about them, of course, but they are there. Tragically, though, while he was away once and they were living there, some of the Rwandan soldiers that had come across the border came one day to the house. And they broke the door down and found that these women were living there, and they took turns, again, raping Honorata and her friends. And she ended up in a hospital this time with severe injuries to her sexual organs. She took a long, long time to heal, both physically and mentally, as you can imagine. But over time, she didn't allow the despair over her circumstances to dictate the rest of her life. She remembered her vocation to be a teacher, and she soon became a teacher in a program for women who had experienced similar traumas, for rape survivors from Eastern Congo. And she has become an inspiration and a mentor to countless Congolese women and girls who have experienced these horrible physical and emotional traumas. She's even received death threats for the work that she is doing from the militias, but she soldiers on. I asked her, Honorata, how did you decide to help others after all of this that you have endured? And she told me, these women experienced the same traumas that I did, so I wanted to use the experience that I had and this training that I had to help change their lives. And then I asked her, well, what's your dream for the Congo? And she said, rape is a disease that is devastating the Congo. It can stop when the war ends. So I dream of peace in the Congo. And I think that's, ladies and gentlemen, is where students come in. As it turns out, the war in the Congo is fueled by our demand for cell phones and laptops and iPods, video games, all these electronic products which contain minerals mined in Congo that power these products and make them work. We're all part of it, inadvertently. A student movement is now being built all across the United States, campus to campus and in high schools, for the women and girls of the Congo. Just like the one that was built last decade for Darfur and is in the process of being built for the kids in northern Uganda called Invisible Children. Some of you may have heard of it. The Congo one is focusing on having conflict-free campuses. It's very exciting. Sound crazy? Has such a thing like this ever worked in the United States or in the world? Well, let's look. 10 years ago, the deadliest wars, had we had this luncheon 10 years ago, the deadliest wars in the world, if we were going to talk about that, were in Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Angola, over in West Africa. In response to those wars, a student-led movement emerged against the blood diamonds that were fueling these wars, years before Leonardo DiCaprio got involved. Student activism and the movement that they built helped end 3 wars in Africa. These 3 countries are in peace today. It's a remarkable transformation if they're just given a little inch of hope. Why don't many of us know about this? Because if it doesn't bleed, it doesn't lead in our media. In our book, Don Cheadle and I try to get beyond the headlines and try to combat the idea that Africa is helpless and hopeless. It also is about bridging differences for you history and poli-sci buffs out there. Most students might think Africa is much more violent and even different than our country. But let's remember, most African nations like the Congo are some 50, 55, 60 years old as modern nation states. Where was the U.S. 50 years into its independence? Well, there was a massive ethnic cleansing campaign against Native Americans at the time. There was a transatlantic slave trade that was fueling one of the most unprecedented economic growth booms in the history of the world. And we hadn't even fought yet our own Civil War, which was one of the bloodiest in per capita terms in world history. So if we know Africa is not really hopeless, if we know Africa is really not that different than the rest of the world, this allows people, especially young people, to believe that change is possible. And I think back to my own college days. In that little clip there, it talks about it. I saw a show about Ethiopia's famine. This is about a year before Live Aid and We Are the World and all that stuff came out. So it was still sort of a breaking story that would not lead the nightly news, but would just be confined to sort of the midnight Sally Struthers commercials. And I saw this footage, you know, as far as the eye could see, and these people just huddled over small fires. They didn't even have the tents that are usually marked a refugee camp. And I decided to go to Africa. I didn't know anything about it, never taken a course, hadn't even read a book, did not know a single human being on the entire continent. Potentially, I didn't even know it was a continent versus a country. But it was the most amazing experience of my entire life. It altered my destiny, in fact. I wouldn't today, this is breaking news for all of you, I would have been playing shooting guard for the Boston Celtics had this not happened. True story. Back when I went in the 1980s, I was just operating solely on blind faith. A total Lone Ranger. What a difference a few decades can make. Because now, because of the internet, and Facebook, and Twitter, and blogging, and YouTube, and all of the things that we saw at the beginning on the screen there, a student who learns about an issue, any issue that they might be compelled by, they can become a member of either a national or even an international, a global network of caring people who are trying to make a difference together about that issue. It's extraordinary. So during their college careers and then on throughout their lives, students that you have such an influence over in the decisions that you make about what they're going to learn, students will constantly have choices, whether to be upstanders or bystanders when they learn about these issues. And if enough of them choose to be upstanders, they can, together, help change the course of history. Here's why it matters, I think, on issues that my book addresses. Millions of people will not remain homeless in refugee camps. Hundreds of thousands of women and girls will not be sexually assaulted. Tens of thousands of children will not be forced to be soldiers, like the kid on the cover of the book. All this can happen if students lead, and they've been part, by the way, of every social movement, all of you know this, that's made a difference. The women's movement, the civil rights movement, the environmental movement, the peace movement. Just read the history. If you haven't already, it's fascinating, the role of students in each one of these movements. Millions of lives, I believe, halfway around the world can be changed for the better if students, by their actions and their words, simply say enough. Thank you very much.